As discussed, we're going to have an interview with Loong Wang from Ren Protocol. We're going to discuss everything about the project, what they are trying to achieve, and why he's also jumped into blockchain. So welcome, Loong. How are you doing?
Hey, man. Good. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Could you maybe give us some background on your personal journey so far and why you have joined into the crypto space?
Sure. So when I was back in university, I was studying distributed systems, and that's kind of the field that I did all of my research in. And at the end of the day, a blockchain is just a very specific type of distributed system. And around that time, I was also doing a lot of work, started a few ventures with a friend of mine, Ty, who's the CEO. And in 2017, he tapped me on the shoulder and said, blockchain's a thing and it's happening. And I'd kind of checked it out back in maybe 2012. I remember Bitcoin being, $900 a few years later. I remember it being $45 when I first looked at it. And I thought it was cool, but at that time it was really quite like a cypherpunk, screw the man type of ecosystem. And I didn't really get it because of that. And so I didn't pay too much attention. And I came back in 2017, when Ty wanted to do something, and dived back into it and just fell in love with the technology. As a technologist, it's just such interesting stuff going on in that space every day. And so it's really hard to let go of that ever and just, dive deep on a new topic every day.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into crypto, you never get out of it. That's also how I got into the space. You go down a rabbit hole and you just can't get out of it. But if you decided to go into crypto, why did you decide to join the protocol Ren? Or didn't you think of other projects that you could join or do some other stuff into the space? Why did you decide for Ren?
I decided to tackle Ren because it sounded impossible. So the idea of doing a computation on a bunch of machines that were controlled by other people and not allowing any of those machines to know what's going on sounded like it couldn't be done. Like just at a high level, right? That sounds crazy. Like, do a computation, but do it in secret, even though it's happening on someone else's machine. And so, I love tackling problems that seem impossible. And that was a problem that seemed impossible. And it was back in 2017, there was a lot of people talking about interoperability and, trying to get blockchains to talk to each other. And, it was pretty obvious that this was a problem that needed to be solved. And so I guess you start with a problem that needs to be solved. That also seems like it's impossible to solve. And, you've got a brilliant formula for getting me involved.
Well, and down the line, you'll probably see that once you solve one issue, the next issue will come around, or the next problem will come around. As in, scaling was an issue in 2017, and it's still a big problem. But could you give us some insight of what Ren actually is and what the goal and the vision of the protocol are? I mean, you've been touching it a little bit, but maybe you can give us some broader view on the project.
Yeah, sure. So, everyone would be familiar with the two biggest chains, Bitcoin and Ethereum, the two OGs. And, but, on Ethereum, we have all these cool DeFi applications and smart contracts that we can build, but we can't build those kinds of applications on Bitcoin. It just can't be done. However, Bitcoin is obviously a really major asset, and people want to be able to use it in DeFi applications. They want to be able to swap it on a DEX. They want to be able to lend it. They want to be able to borrow it. They want to be able to add it to liquidity pools, and sort of program it in new and interesting ways that aren't possible on Bitcoin. And so what Ren does is it allows people to take Bitcoin and move it onto Ethereum and use it there. And in fact, it's a bit bigger than that. It allows us to move any asset between any chain. So, you might have Bitcoin, you might have Zcash, you might have Bitcoin Cash, you might want to put it on Ethereum or Phantom or Binance Smart Chain and use those assets on those DeFi applications. Without RenVM, that's not possible, but with it, it is.
And in aspect, why do you think that the interoperability is actually heavily needed in the markets right now? As in, for sure, we are still having the scaling issues, but also we've been into a landscape where Ethereum was the only real platform that was worked and built on. And if Ethereum 2.0 comes out, do you believe that we're going to flip back to that sole ecosystem, or are we going to have like a global ecosystem with multiple platforms just connecting with each other? Why do you believe that this is so important to have if we want to build further?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously really buy into the multi-chain hypothesis, this idea that we're not going to see one chain win it all. I mean, even if we got close to that, I would think that Bitcoin's always going to be around. It's always going to be a thing. And there's going to be a smart contract platform that comes along. Maybe it's going to be Ethereum. Maybe it's going to be Ethereum 2.0. Maybe it's going to be something else. And at the very least, you need Bitcoin on that platform, at the very least. But I also think all these chains, at the end of the day, they have different trade-offs, right? Like Ethereum is built with a particular kind of security and scalability in mind. Solana is built with a different kind of scalability and security thing in mind. And every chain is really, they all have their different trade-offs. And they also have their own developer experience. So as someone that wants to build applications, that experience is very different on these different chains. And so I might favor one over the other simply for that experience. But if I build on one chain and you build on another chain, ideally our applications can still talk to each other and they can still work together and they can still, share liquidity and share users. And if you want that to be possible, then you have to buy into the multi-chain idea.
Well, and also if you think about the multi-chain ID, for what specific or which solutions could a bridge be used? As in, you've been touching Bitcoin through ETH, but also in general, just between platforms in itself. Can we also be using those bridges for NFTs or other tokenized security tokens or whatever? Can we be using those bridges for?
Yeah, so you can send any asset across those bridges. And with RenVM, you can also send arbitrary kind of data. So an NFT is interesting because it's not really an asset in the same way that like an ERC20 is. It's more just like a piece of data that moves around and then people kind of value that piece of data. But also if you want to have an application, maybe one application that lives on multiple chains simultaneously, and you want to be able to move data between the applications in order to make that work, that isn't also possible with Ren.
And we've been discussing Ren Protocol, but you've been touching RenVM. Could you give us some insight on what's been happening recently with Ren Protocol? Because I know that there's some changes, but maybe the listeners don't know why it's now called RenVM. Could you give us some information on that?
Oh yeah, so Ren is kind of that's the name of the token. So sometimes I just kind of use those names. RenVM is the name of the underlying blockchain that we've built that makes all of this possible. And Ren is the name of the token that powers it. So sometimes we call it Ren Protocol, RenVM. They're all kind of synonymous for the same thing. Yeah.
And in what type of progress, how is the project developing right now? Because it used to be one of the first bridges between Bitcoin and ETH, as far as I remember. But how is the developments right now?
So I think the first bridge was actually WBTC, which was a project that was initially collaboration with the Ren team and BitGo and Kyber as well. And yeah, we launched our own solution, which is a more decentralized solution in May last year. So we've been live on mainnet for a year now. And we've made some amazing progress in that time. So we support over almost 20 different bridges now. So 7 different assets between 4 different chains. So 28 different bridges. That's Bitcoin, Zcash, Bitcoin Cash, Digibyte, Dogecoin, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Phantom. I'm definitely forgetting some. And in that time, we've transacted more than $5 billion worth of volume back and forth, and at our peak had 1 billion total value locked.
Well, that's amazing. That's tons of volume in general. You've said WBTC, that was one of the first ones as well. What is the difference between the two of you, and how does using Ren Bitcoin improve on Wrap Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Wrap Bitcoin is a very similar concept, but it's custodied by a single group, which is BitGo. So BitGo is obviously quite a big and trusted Bitcoin custodian. So, if you've got a bunch of Bitcoin and you don't trust yourself to keep it safe, you can give it to them and they'll keep it safe for you. And some people really like that. They like not having to be responsible for their own assets because they don't trust themselves, or, they want someone to sue if something goes wrong. And so they like having a centralized person there that has insurance that can take care of everything. But it's obviously a bit anti-thesis to the whole crypto idea, right? Which is that you're in control of your own money. There's no single centralized party that can, corrupt things. And obviously, in theory, if BitGo wanted to misbehave, they could, and they could steal all the Bitcoin. Or if they made a mistake, they could accidentally lose it, which is probably more likely than being malicious. Now, where Ren BTC, or I guess any Ren asset that's sent between chains, differs, is that we don't have a centralized custodian. So there's not like one machine that's keeping all of these assets safe as they're moving around between the different chains. It's spread over thousands of machines, and it has all of the nice properties that a blockchain typically has. That you need a majority of people to be misbehaving in order for anything to go wrong. There are proper economic incentives in place and all of that sort of good blockchainy stuff.
And in general, I mean, projects themselves are also trying to bridge now between the platforms. So in what way is Ren different than that? And why should people use the Ren protocol instead of just like from the platform themselves?
Sure. So that's an interesting one. So a lot of these projects, some of them build very bespoke chains that again are still centralized, so they still custody the assets while they're moving between the chains, or they're like built specifically for that application. So it works, but only for that application. And if another application wanted to piggyback off it, it couldn't. And at the end of the day, building a large and secure interoperability protocol is an incredibly hard thing to do. And RenVM has already done it, and it works for any kind of application. So it doesn't matter what kind of application you want to build, it works through RenVM. And so a project can use RenVM to sort of get that multi-chain capability without having to build it bespoke themselves. And if they want to integrate with other applications more easily, then that's much easier to do as well, because we already have the liquidity there and we already have the capability.
Well, and like one of the topics or one of the markets that bridges are heavily needed is DeFi. And let's just discuss DeFi in just the broad sense of the word. As in, DeFi has been solely focused on meme coins recently, and I'm quite happy that bubble got burst. But how do you feel about the entire DeFi sector right now? As I think it just got hijacked by other people trying to make short-term bucks or money with it. But how do you see the developments of DeFi? We've had DeFi Summer 2020. Now we are building again. Where do you see it go? And what do you think is needed to get adoption in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Maybe the trillion-dollar question. How to get adoption in DeFi? I mean, part of it is certainly getting over these meme coins. I think it's very hard for people who aren't part of the space to take it seriously and think that it's a serious thing at scale. I think that's always going to be something that's prevalent though in crypto. I mean, one of the downsides of like complete self-sovereignty and liberty is that people are going to do stupid things and they're going to get traction and it's going to be frustrating. And it's always been a story for crypto is that there's been a good purpose for it and there's been a bad purpose. And occasionally the bad things hijack the good things. But I think what we've seen over the last several years is that DeFi, I mean, there's all this fluctuation that happens up here, but that baseline is improving every day. And it's easy to get lost up in the noise of all that volatility. And I don't just mean like price volatility, but also just like meme hype. Volatility, if you want to call it that. Yeah, hype. But that baseline is getting better. Like really core projects like Uniswap v3 have come out and improved upon their foundations. You've got projects like MakerDAO. I mean, one thing that's really, really cool that happened in the recent crash that no one really talked about, which is a good sign, is that DAI stayed pretty damn stable, right? You saw these huge drops in crypto prices, and yet DAI was the most stable it's ever been through a period of that kind of volatility. And that's a sign of real maturation. And it's boring. It sounds really boring. It's a project that's been around for many, many years, and it didn't mess up. It just carried on as usual. And that doesn't sound interesting. It doesn't make headlines, but it's a good sign that the ecosystem is maturing and actually delivering on its promise slowly. And I think it's just a matter of patience. It's going to take many, many more years for more of these projects to develop and to prove their maturity, and to build out that infrastructure like Ren is doing with interoperability and being, making it able for DeFi applications to pick whatever chain they want and just build there. And as that, progresses and solidifies, it'll start being taken more seriously. The question around user adoption is a tough one, and probably, I mean, my guess is that it's all going to be around user experience, right? I mean, the email password login is worlds away from private key management in terms of how easy they are to do. And I had friends get into the crypto space in the most recent bull market, and they just had no clue what they were doing. They just wanted to buy ETH and hold it. And they came to me after a week of digging around and was like, I don't understand what MetaMask is, or like what DeFi is, or what all these things are. And I think that onboarding story for people that are coming from traditional finance, it's really easy to forget how crazy this space is when you've been in it for so long. It all seems obvious to people like you and me who talk about it every day, but to people in TradFi, it's like the Wild West still.
Well, also not people just in traditional finance, but just in general, if you're speaking with people who are not in the crypto bubble, it's just like you're saying some fugazi to them, because it's just too complex and they don't understand. And the only things they hear is that Bitcoin has too much energy it's using, and Dogecoin. That's the only two topics that they are actually hearing. So in terms of adoption, I think right now we just see that the crypto is getting hyped because people want to invest in it and they want to make money with it. And then probably in like 2, 3, 4 years from now, we're going to see people that are actually using crypto. And then the two things that we just need is user experience. And then second, probably that people feel the need to actually use crypto, which is currently the fact in Turkey or all those countries getting screwed by their own currency. But regarding user experience, what do you think we need to get better user experiences? Right now, MetaMask, Uniswap, all quite complex. Also, Binance in general to trade on is just complex. Wallets, private keys are complex. How are we going to get like to the next stage, and how is Ren adapting to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's all about simplicity, right? And part of that is, if you think about users in the normal non-crypto space at the moment, they don't, I mean, most people don't actively think about lending assets, right? Or like actively participating in the financial system. They kind of just take their money, it goes into a bank account, it generates a little bit of yield. Maybe they invest in stocks a little bit, depending on how much spare cash they might have. And then they spend out of that account directly, and if they need a big house, they might take out a loan. But I mean, if you've taken out a loan on a house, you know that the bank manages pretty much all of the craziness behind the scenes. They just get you to sign a piece of paper and out the door you go. It's relatively simple. Whereas DeFi is still very complicated. There's not much in the way of like good user interfaces that cleanly abstract everything for you. And I don't mean that in the sense that they make it easy. Certainly there are interfaces that make lending very easy, but you need interfaces that make lending a non-issue. You don't even do it. You just put your money in and it is automatically lent out. It's automatically generating yield. And you can just spend that money on demand, and you don't have to think about actively managing your money, because most people don't want to actively manage their money. They've got other things they want to do, right? They want to go fly kites in the park. And so I think that's a big part of it. And I think where RenVM fits into that puzzle is that if you think about all that craziness and complicatedness, the last thing a user wants to be able to do is think about what chain they've got to use, right? Maybe MetaMask only works for Ethereum, and Sol Wallet only works for Solana, and Binance Wallet only works for Binance. Like you can't seriously expect a user to have a dozen different wallets for a dozen different chains to interact with a dozen different applications. It's just not going to happen. And if you don't want to do that, you need an interoperability solution, and you need something that is general purpose. And that's where Ren really comes in, and where I think it shines above these like specific bridges for specific individual purposes. Because if you have specific bridges in the long term, you're going to have a dozen different bridges and you're going to have to build support for all of those bridges. Whereas what you really need is just one bridge, one solution that does it all, lets users interact with any chain they want, any application, any token, doesn't matter. And eventually we're going to see wallets like one wallet that works across multiple chains. And I've already seen projects that are kind of attempting to do this, where you can hold your Bitcoin in this wallet, but you can also hold your ETH, and you can interact with Binance applications, and you can interact with Phantom applications, and you can interact with Ethereum applications, all from one wallet. And I think that's the direction the ecosystem has to head if they want users to get on board and keep things simple for those users.
People just want to have one simple application where they can do everything. Like they don't need, or they don't want to have a MetaMask and this and that and ton of gas fees and the complexity. They want to keep it simple. But in order to get adoption, some parts of the world already have to adapt to DeFi. So which sector do you believe is going to adapt first towards DeFi in general? Is it going to be gaming again?
I think gaming has proven time and time again to be a really great path forward to adopting any technology. So I do think that gaming is going to have a really big part to play. Games have big marketplaces, tons of transactions that go through games, marketplaces that are entirely virtual, where you've got credits and you trade them for, one-off items, and you want to be able to transfer those between different games. So I think the whole NFT and token market makes a lot of sense in gaming. But I also think the first step is going to be people managing large assets, because at the moment, individuals managing large amounts of assets. At the moment, if you want to people complain about the speed and expensiveness of blockchains, right? Bitcoin's slow and it costs me so many dollars to use it. But I mean, imagine trying to send any reasonable amount of money overseas, right? From, let's say, Australia to Hong Kong. This is a transaction that I had to do recently. And it's crazy. You have to go into the bank personally. You have to sign a form. You have to sign 3 forms. You have to get 2 of them and their managers to sign forms. The whole process takes 40 minutes, right? And it costs you $50. And I'm thinking, crypto, come on. This would have taken me 2 minutes, 10 minutes at the worst, and it would have cost me a fraction of this. And I wouldn't have had to interact with 5 different people. And even not interacting with 5 different people, that's something that's becoming more and more prevalent these days. So I think those are going to be the primary use cases, because really people are getting lost in the weeds of all these fancy DeFi applications. But just having your money and being able to send it to whoever you want to send it worldwide without having to get someone's permission, that is a killer use case. And I think that's where we're really going to start. And I think that's why groups of people in countries, like Turkey, like Venezuela, like Argentina, flock to Bitcoin in these, when they have struggles in their own countries, because that's the only place you really can go.
Yeah, you keep your purchasing power in just having Bitcoin. I guess a country that's just getting destroyed with the currency itself, it shows the use case of crypto in general. It's just not in the first world that we're seeing, or that we need to use crypto at this stage yet, but we can see it in those relatively smaller countries where the currency is just collapsing. What we also see is that in 2017, the DeFi sector was pretty much around Ethereum with the ICO hype and the first layers of this entire ecosystem. Right now, we can see that Polygon, Solana, and multiple platforms are getting out there. How is Ren positioning themselves in the fast growth of DeFi right now? And how are you going to move forward? You've already mentioned that you're building way more bridges right now. Is that going to be the key focus?
Yeah, so I think the key focus for us is figuring out how to scale in terms of quickly adopting new chains as quickly as possible, and safely as possible. So we've begun investing a lot of time and energy into building out RenVM in such a way that it's easy to plug in new chains. And to sort of prove that point, over the last month, we've been doing what we've been calling the blockchain blitz. And it will be over in a couple of weeks. And on average, we will have added a new chain every week. And there are a lot of chains and a lot of layer 2s, but there's not one every week. So with the ability to add at that rate, you can keep up with whatever the innovation is. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also exponential. So you have to keep on. Otherwise, you're just missing the boat, right?
Exactly.
Another thing is maybe negative, but right now we see many exploits and hacks, and Ren uses smart contracts to lock in funds from one blockchain while issuing them on another. And those exploits and hacks are constantly happening on meme coins as well. But do you think that this trend will continue and even, well, slow down the actual DeFi growth, or are we just continuing this pace right now?
That's that's a tough one.
As in, like, the people who joined such a meme coin and got hacked and lost their money, they are not coming back.
Yeah, I think all things get arbitraged away. All opportunities get arbitraged away.
Yep.
And an example of that is like the click rate of like banner ads used to be something like 26%. I don't know when the last time I clicked a banner ad was, like ever. The
Nope.
click rate now is like sub like 0.1%. And that's because as internet users, we've all become accustomed to a sort of a vibe, I guess, of what seems like a scam, what's an ad, what's real, what's legit. Like everyone's experienced that fake ad where it's like, download this thing that you're trying to download, and it's actually not a download button, it's an ad, and it's going to take you somewhere else. And I think we're still in that very nascent phase of DeFi when it's very easy to scam people because the space is so confusing. And I think the best thing that we as a space can do to fix that is to simplify. And it's kind of been the unified message throughout here, is to simplify, make it easy for users. If it's hard for users to get lost, it's harder for them to get scammed. And to have good indexes where people can go and see trusted applications and develop reputations in the ecosystem. And it become, I guess, and part of that is going to be being more collaborative. And projects seem to struggle to admit when other projects, even if they're not that related to them, are good. And so everyone's just constantly shitting on each other, right? Mm-hmm. And so it becomes really hard to identify a scam because everyone's shitting on it, but that doesn't mean anything because everyone's shitting on everyone. So we kind of have to be a bit more collaborative and put more effort into making it clear what's high quality, what's trusted, what's battle tested, of the likes of, Uniswap V2 at least, and Compound and MakerDAO, and these projects that have been around for a long time and have a lot of value locked up in them are probably more secure. If someone was going to hack Aave, yeah, they would have done it by now, surely, right? I mean, the incentive is massive. You've got billions and billions of dollars on the line. And they've been around for long enough that you can kind of build up this sense that, with enough audits and enough open source people looking at it and enough incentive for people to try and steal it and enough time, that you can be pretty sure that it's reasonably secure.
Well, regarding the toxicness of the space, I guess it's just the community members in general that are quite hooliganistic, I would call it. Just it's like football matches all the time. It's like Arsenal against United. But yeah, I think we should be working more together. But in general, I think the projects themselves are doing that. At least that's what I'm hearing from the community. You don't see that toxicness between the projects at all, because everybody has the same vibe and the same vision. But regarding the exploits and the hacks, what in particular is Ren doing to minimize the risk of such an exploit to their own smart contracts?
Yeah, so we are taking things really, really slowly. That's about all we can do. As I said, all that you can do is get as many audits as you can and spend as much time as you can at each stage of the project. So the whole rollout of RenVM is being staged, and we're still going through those processes right now, where we start in a slightly more centralized place, where we have the capability to react to bugs and to fix things that go wrong, and slowly over time evolved into somewhere that's fully decentralized. I mean, part of the challenge with fully decentralized applications is that if there's a bug, you can't do anything. You can't stop it and you can't fix it. That's kind of the point of decentralization, but it's also kind of the risk. So it's important that you take your time to get there, and you go slowly and you go intentionally. And that's kind of the angle that we're taking to make sure that by the time we get to full decentralization and no longer have any control over the project whatsoever, and we are getting there, that we know that the system is safe.
Well, regarding going slowly, it's we've been touching on RenVM and also the project itself. What were the big milestones of the past year that you were achieving with the project? As in, you've been around for quite a long time, and what has been the huge milestones that you've achieved so far?
Well, I think one of the big milestones we achieved very recently was being live for a full year and not having lost a single dollar of users' funds. That's a huge achievement. It's sad that that's a big achievement in the DeFi space, but it is. Earlier in the year, we transacted our first $1 billion of volume. At one point, we also had 1 billion total value locked. Those are big milestones as well, because they prove a certain level of maturity, that you can have had thousands of transactions of huge value going through the system and had the system function correctly. We also consider it a huge win every single time the market goes through like these intense moments of volatility, and RenVM works very well, because what you used to see a lot of the time with new applications, especially lending markets, for example, and anything that involves collateral, is that when times got really volatile, a lot of the assumptions people made about how volatile could crypto really be would get broken, and their systems would break, and things would collapse and they would stop working, and things would go bad. You know, it happened with MakerDAO last year. It happened with Compound last year as well. It happened with a few networks here and there where the volatility caused serious issues. So every single time we get through a period like we have been in the last maybe month or so, you know, every time Elon Musk tweets something negative about the space and the prices go like this, and RenVM doesn't. But every time RenVM makes it through one of those, we consider that a big milestone.
Well, I guess it's the entire market that's just going through phases. I mean, there's so much more adoption right now, so many more users, while the volatility is still a heavy outlier, and you're building the actual project to be able to remain constant during such an outlier, I guess.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Not only protocols, but also exchanges still have to develop a lot. I mean, I do remember that during the crash, I was not able to trade at all. I could log in, but that was about it. What are the plans for Ren for the future, the near and short term and the long term? As in, you're touching that you're doing it quite slowly, but what are the targets that you would like to achieve at Ren?
Yeah. So this year, in the short term, we are hoping to take that next step towards decentralization. Now that we're getting much closer to it, and sort of we've been live for a year and everything's gone well, it's now time to take that next step and become more decentralized. This year, we're also opening up a community fund. So some percentage of the revenue generated by the protocol and by the nodes that operate the protocol is going to be recycled back into the community and encourage liquidity programs, encourage third-party developers, and, you know, like incentivize people to build projects that leverage RenVM and incentivize people to adopt RenVM assets. So that's going to be a big thing. The other thing that we're really excited for, and I'm personally very excited for, is we're going to start expanding the capability of RenVM. So interoperability is one of the cool things that you can do with RenVM, but the technology that we use under the hood has so many more applications beyond that. Applications in secret computation, in autonomous smart contracts, in so many interesting and weird use cases. And so as we get to next year, we're going to start investigating those use cases with more tenacity and start making them available and allowing people to leverage RenVM, not just for interoperability, but to build sort of any kind of application that they can imagine. And so make it like very, very general purpose.
Well, that's a big mission. I mean, that's
huge mission. It sounds impossible.
That's a huge mission. The final question I always have for my guests is a personal one, which is if you are 40 years older from now, 40 years older from now, let's hope we can get there. And if you have to look back to your life, what is your personal goal in life? What would make you happy if you have to look back at that age?
Good question. I guess I would want, at the personal level, I would want health and fitness for me and the people around me, both mentally, physically, fiscally. But I think I would want to look back and know that I changed something, know that I saw a problem in the world that was deep rooted, whether that's, there are so many problems out there. Maybe it is finance. Maybe in 40 years, it's going to be something else. Maybe it's going to be going to space or solving the world's food shortage or, figuring out how to live forever so that I don't just make it to 60, I make it to 600. But knowing that, you can take the system and shake it up a little bit and being able to look at something and be like, yep, that new system, the way that it works now, as opposed to how it used to work, it's got a little bit of me in it. It's got a little bit of flavor. It's got a little bit of Loong.
Yeah, being part of that. Well, going to space, we can just tweet to Elon Musk about it, I guess.
Maybe. For now, I guess it's revolutionizing financial industry. We'll have to make do.
Well, slow steps, right?
Yeah, baby steps.
So finally, where can we find you and also Ren Protocol if you want to learn more about the project or RenVM? What are the socials, etc.? They're also going to be in the description, but maybe you'd like to add something to it.
Yeah, sure. If you want to follow me on Twitter, BZLWANG is my handle, or come check us out on Telegram at Ren Protocol. Ren Protocol on Telegram, and that's also what we are on Twitter. Or we also have a forum if you want to come and participate and ask questions, and you prefer the more forum style, you can go to forum.renproject.io, and that's also where we do all of our governance and sort of like improvement discussions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I'm going to wish you all best of luck with the project and your personal journey as well.
Likewise. Thanks heaps.